Hey guys, it's Allan here, and I'm excited to be with you guys today. As you can see, Taryn is not with me. We are going to be speaking on worship today. I've received a lot of messages on Instagram specifically about when I'll do a podcast on worship and speak about worship, the heart of worship. And today is going to be exactly that. So I'm excited to share with you my heart on worship, to share my journey of leading worship the last 18 to 19 years and what I have experienced myself personally in worship. I think many people can say a lot of things about worship that have been leading worship or that serve in a worship team or part of their worship community or worship artist if you a person that has songs and stuff like that. But I'm sharing with you my heart today about worship. I think today I'm going to title it The Heart of Worship because there's a lot of things that we can speak about concerning worship. And there's a lot of attributes to what worship teams or worship leaders or worship artists have made worship out to be. And I think there's some things that is controversial that we can say that people avoid speaking about that I think is important to speak about and to not address, but just share with each other, share our hearts. And please don't forget to comment. You please engage specifically with this podcast today. I'd love to hear your heart on worship. What do you see worship as? What God has been speaking to you about worship? I think to start right off, I want to speak about worship specifically. And if you find today controversial, if you find today challenging, I think it's a good thing. This last month, have been challenging myself when it comes to worship specifically. And I thought about it today, and I thought about Cain and Abel. And I was wondering why the Lord rejected Cain's offering and sacrifice to him. And I realized that it was more of a heart position and posture when he offered the sacrifice to God, that God chose Abel's sacrifice or offering. And I realized again how important it is for the heart and that the heart matters. I think with worship and people leading worship and however long you've been leading worship for or been in a worship ministry for, you can very quickly and easily get to the place of where the activity of worship becomes the function. Or let me not say that. The activity of worship replaces the relationship. And it's very easy for me. I think for me, it's been challenging over the years. And as I remember one specific year before I moved to my current church, Encounter Church, I remember standing on my previous church's platform. And I remember standing on the platform and I felt like an alien. And it wasn't because the church was wrong or the people were bad or anyone did injustice towards me. It was what was going on in my heart. And I realized standing on the platform that morning or that evening, and I realized something's not right. The posture of my heart isn't right when it comes to worship. And I went home and I did introspection concerning my heart towards God in worship, what I've seen worship to be as, because I've been doing it for 10 years. It's very easy for you as a worship person or a worship pastor, worship leader, whatever you do. It's very easy for you to hallelujah, sing in worship, standing on the stage and mimicking the actions every week because it's something that you start doing out of memory. And I know I say this a lot to people, is it's very easy to serve God out of memory and not relationship. But what happens to you as a person is you end up dying. So you can never, ever pour out of a cup that is not full. And that's why the heart of worship and your relationship with the Lord is so important with leading worship or being in charge of a worship ministry or being a worship artist. You can never lead out of a place that's empty. You can't take people to a place where you yourself have never been before. And it's something that I think has been so important for me as a worshiper and a worship leader, a worship pastor, someone that releases music or writes songs. I can never, ever give or pour out from a place where there's nothing going on. And it's something that has really challenged me over the years, is to make sure that my relationship with God and the intimacy, what happens in the secret place, is real. And like I said previously, it's easy to get to a place where your congregation can see you lift your hands up. Your congregation can see you go on your knees. And it might look amazing to them, and it might look like you are having an amazing time with the Lord. But meanwhile, nothing is going on the inside of you. And slowly but surely you die. It feels like a piece of you just dies. And it's important to pull yourself towards yourself again and get back to the place of first love. Get back to reminding yourself why you do what you do. What is the heart behind your worship? I was challenged. The Lord said to me, I was spending time with the Lord, and I remember the Lord said to me, Allan, why do you love me? And I realized, sheesh, I've been in like a mechanical mode, if that's the word, or robotic, where I've just been going and going and going and going and doing things every single Sunday, getting up at 6 a.m., doing sound check, doing praise and worship. And it challenged me because I realized I love the Lord. Obviously, your general response is going to be because I love God, and out of your heart flows everything. And if you love Him, you're going to worship Him. But it challenged me, my why. I realized the Lord was asking me, why are you doing what you're doing? And I think it's important to get to a place where you remind yourself why you do what you do. And I personally had to, and I have to, do that often, because it's easy to get to a place as a worshiper where it just becomes about the music. It just becomes about the songs. It just becomes about building up and what it's actually not supposed to be about, because you miss heart. What is the point of worship when heart is missing? And I always go back to a story that I spoke about previously, I think in our first podcast with Verona, where I said I was in my previous ministry and I was leading youth. It was very long ago. And the Lord said to me on the platform, you're reminding me of Lucifer because you're making it about you. But then I also realized after saying that to Verona, I've lost the reason of why I was worshiping at that moment. It was because of me. And I think in the worship community and worship world right now, there's so much me-focused worship. Even in our songwriting, there's so many songs that is about yourself rather than actually glorifying God and worshiping God. There's many songs that I think we've mistaken to be so powerful because it's based on emotions and not really based on worship, because I'm stirring myself, reminding myself of how bad my life circumstances are or situations that I've gone through in the past. And these chords are making me feel emotional, because we all know music has an effect on you. But then you get challenged by whether you are really worshiping. And is it just an emotional experience? Because it's easy for us to make worship just an emotional experience or a thing about me and not about God. And sometimes we miss it. And I've been there. And I think a lot of people in worship ministry or churches or whatever, they go through these phases and they go through these things. And you have to constantly check your heart and navigate what's happening on the inside of you. So I think in closing with regards to what I just said is that I want to challenge you with regards to the heart of worship is, are you worshiping God for an encounter, or are you worshiping God just for an experience? Because let me just tell you one thing. With regards to worship leading, no person, no pastor, wherever you serve, no one wants a worshiper that doesn't worship themselves, whether it be at home privately or on the platform. Sometimes I had to learn in worship leading is that it requires you to go to a costly place. It requires you to go to a place in worship where God sometimes needs you to break open before Him so that an atmosphere can break open in your congregation or in your church. And sometimes we forget that people are very scared to go to a costly place because that place hurts. And, David said, I will not offer God something that costs me nothing. And I think we sometimes forget that in worship. We can so easily just say lyrics. We can so easily just sing songs. But very seldomly are we allowing ourselves to go to the place in our hearts that we're scared to go. There's moments in worship for me that I've felt I have to go to a place of brokenness or sincerity with the Lord with regards to whatever I was dealing with that day or that week or that month. And I would only feel breakthrough in the atmosphere or feel breakthrough when I, in my heart at that moment on stage, went, God, I'm going to go to that place. I'm going to go to that place today where I'm going to worship you from. And even though I'm going to that place today and it hurts me, I know that broken worship is powerful. And for me to worship from that place and that place that's real and transparent before God, because regardless, again, of the lyrics that you sing, He sees the lyrics of your heart. And worshiping from that place, I find to be the most powerful place to worship from in worship. And maybe someone needs to hear this today. I don't know why I'm saying this specifically. But broken worship, never ever be intimidated by the place you are at in your life when you lead worship. People have this facade and this thinking that those that lead worship don't go through life, or people that are on platforms or have a microphone don't go through life because they have a microphone and a spotlight on them. But we go through life. Life is lifing. People are going through things. And I think God honors the transparency that you get to at a place before Him, even if you are the person leading that service that day, leading worship that day. And He honors that. And I've, as an Allan, experienced many times in worship where I've experienced the presence of God more real and more powerful by being at that place of transparency and realness. Because what's the point of me just speaking or singing? But God knows what's going on inside of me. I have a joke with the worship teams at church, and I say to them, before we pray for a service, I say to them, we have to, whatever you're going through today, before you step on the platform, it's like, think of it like taking your shoes off and leaving it at the stairs. Because when you come and lead worship, know that God is not intimidated by anything that you're going through, and that when you worship Him in spirit and in truth, and you worship from a sincere place, regardless of the cost of that worship at that moment, God will honor it and God will come through. I've experienced many times in worship where the atmosphere has been heavy or hard or just not good. And God required the worshipers to make a sound, release a song, release something in the atmosphere. Because at the end of the day, worshipers, you have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to create the atmosphere and let the hearts or the soil of the hearts of the people be ready to receive the word. And that happens when they open themselves up before God and they worship Him in spirit and truth. But you yourself, and I want to challenge you today, is get to that place, because I have to remind myself every day of my life that I have to go to that place of rawness and realness before God so that I can lead people and take people to a place where they need to go, if that makes sense. I again say that you can never lead people to a place where you've never been before. You know why you have things happening in the atmosphere, or you don't have things happening in the atmosphere in many instances in church services, is because nothing is going on in the hearts of the people that are leading the people in worship. So nothing happens because nothing's actually happening in the people that are in the worship team. And it's a challenge, because you as a worship leader, worship director, if God has entrusted you to lead a department, you have to shepherd and pastor those people as well. But at the same time, you need to remember that if nothing is going on the inside of the people that are on the platform that are leading God's people, then nothing's going to go on in the atmosphere, because it's not real, it's fake. And that's where it leads to entertainment. The minute there's no relationship and intimacy, that's where I honestly feel like the Lord steps aside, because it's not real. And I think we've replaced, and I have to be very careful with what I say today, I think we've replaced entertainment very easily when it comes to worship. You know, I watch certain things, certain services, and I'm obviously not going to call any church out or pastor, but I one day watched a service and I thought, is this high praise or is this hype? Because it looked like hype to me, and I'm not judging the congregation or the church, but when I watched this specific service, it looked like hype to me. It didn't look like high praise. And I think we need to be very careful when we make it an emotional thing, because emotions are deceptive. I think the other thing for me that really is a challenge, and I think every worship leader, worship artist, regardless of your accolades and what you accomplish in your life, it's very hectic to see the celebrity culture for me within the church. And I think that's something that displeases the heart of God sometimes, because here we are representing Him when we're using His name as a stepping stone just to buff up our name. And it's very, very important to not act like Beyonce when you are in a church green room, or when a church has invited you, or whatever it is, where you are leading worship and people are entrusting you to do praise and worship, or to lead them in worship, or they booked you for whatever. I think for me, that's a challenging thing. And that is bred. That thing starts in your heart because it's pride. And like I said earlier on, it's a Luciferian spirit to me. It's a me, it's a I thing. And when people speak to me, not that I'm anyone that has accomplished much, but I make sure that when people speak to me and they say, oh no, it's an honor to meet you, I make sure that I redirect them that this is about the Lord's work. And I'm leading worship, and He's entrusted me with my voice. He's entrusted me with His presence. He's entrusted me with a gift that ultimately has to give Him glory, that has to give Him honor, that has to give Him praise. And I think we've created a celebrity culture within the worship world that is actually quite sickening. I've experienced these things firsthand, and I'm not gonna call any artist or person out today, because at the end of the day, God sees you. But for me as an Allan, the day I make what God has entrusted me with, and it makes me emotional, what God has entrusted me with and His presence, the day I make it about myself and my voice and not His people and not His presence, then I don't want to do this anymore. And I think it's important for you yourself to always stay grounded, whether that means you have accountability, whether that means you walk a road with someone. For example, I have someone that I'm walking a road with in the United States with regards to worship. I'm not going to mention their names. It's 2 or 3 people. And I've been so blown away by the humility and the way these people walk in their lives. It's people that, again, you worship to most of their songs. You will know who they are if I mention their names. And they walk with such humility, because I will never forget the one person said to me in 2007. It was a big conference at a church, and she looked at me and she said to me, she pointed at my face and she said, never ever forget that this is not about you, that this is about God's heart for His people, and it's about making sure that He loves on them in the moment of worship, and that they open their hearts and they are able to receive from them. And I think I'll never ever forget that, because when pride comes in and you make it about yourself, how is God going to move? What are you? It's like vomit that comes out of you, actually. The worship that comes out of you is actually vomit, because what you are singing about and what you're saying is not in alignment with your heart. And that must be a stench before the Lord. How can we worship when we secretly hate people in secret? You know, I have to, obviously you see a final product with regards to this podcast, but there's many moments where I have to stop myself from saying certain things, because I'm not sure if it's appropriate to say exactly what I'm feeling, because A, I'm not here for judgment. B, I'm not criticizing anyone in particular. I don't name shame. I'm not going to do that. But you know, when worship leaders, when you're entrusted with a platform, you have the ability to create division. You have the ability to, and this is the worshipers in general, you have the ability to form a doctrine just by the songs that you choose, by what the pastor's entrusted you with a microphone. You have the ability to display God for who He is not, by not only the songs that you're singing, but by the lifestyle you live and the way people see you off stage. So let me say this. Yes, we can create a doctrine by the songs that we sing, because obviously this is why I believe accountability is important. You must make sure that you correlate with your pastor with regards to your DNA, what your church teaches, what your church preaches, and make sure that it's the Word of God. But at the same time, make sure that you as a person are not standing on your platform as a hypocrite, because I don't see how God will honor your worship if who you are as a person doesn't back up and support you when you have to be a person of God on a platform. And maybe this is challenging to some. It's challenging me right now, because I'm not perfect. Right now, I'm saying this, and I'm actually challenged myself, because I think about what I do wrong, what I say wrong. We fall short every single day of our lives, all of us. No one is perfect, regardless of what platform you have. And that's challenged me right now. It's important with regards to celebrity culture to not have a celebrity culture in a space where the only celebrity is Jesus Christ. And this might sound so cliche to some people today, or corny, but I actually don't care, because we focus on people and an audience, but your main focus should be the audience of one, and that's Him. And sometimes we miss it. And I realized today that even sitting here in this podcast, that the Lord wanted me to share this specifically about worship, because it's stuff that some people just don't want to talk about. And I think it's important. Everyone wants to be hallelujah, shandai, shandai, and speak about the good things. But no one wants to speak about the real things that people are actually experiencing behind closed doors, or in a rehearsal, or in life in general. And it's important to go to that place of realness and vulnerability, because at the end of the day, God, again, I said previously, God honors that. And why I'm speaking about the celebrity culture is it's very easy. And this is where I think I might get slightly trashed maybe, but I don't really care. I think we've made a mistake when it comes to professionalism within the church. I am not saying today that you cannot be a professional musician in the church. I'm not saying that today. I'm saying that there is a problem when you have people in your church that see a church full of musicians and they see people worshiping every single Sunday. Next minute, the people that they've been seeing for 3 years is replaced suddenly by someone that they've never seen in the church before. And a hireling spirit is then given as a perception to your congregation. I had a very interesting phone call from someone that's a professional musician, met with me at our church on our balcony, and spoke to me about worship, spoke to me about what he's done, everywhere he's traveled, awards, songs, the stuff that I really don't care about. And in the conversation, he said, "So who's your pastor again?" And I think this is the reality of what some churches face with, is that we complain about a hireling spirit within the church sometimes, about people that don't serve, or people that don't want to serve, or don't have the heart of servitude. And it's part of your church culture and DNA. But what are we allowing on our platforms when we have people that are replaced a week later after someone has left, for example, at a church? And sorry, not sorry, I think it's important to make sure that you have people that have the heart for your church and your people, and that don't treat the platform or worship as just a platform and a stage. And I think that's important. I think I've made the mistake before previously. I don't see a problem with getting people involved that are professional, that do this for a living, and you're roping them in and you're wanting them to be a part of the vision. But I do see it as a problem where you are only getting people in that are professional, but there's people that are in your church that just need a little bit of help, and they have the vision of the church and they've served. Sometimes we skip the anointed because we look for the famous, and that's not how God works. God found David. He overlooked everyone else. And I think sometimes we can miss that within church, specifically when it comes to worship, is that we overlook a lot of people to bring in the professionals. And it doesn't take away the professionals' hearts for worship. Please understand me today. I'm not saying that it is a wrong thing to do. What I am saying is wrong is that if these people that you are getting are only from the outside of the church, they don't really know anything about your ministry, they don't have the vision or the DNA of the church, you're going to have a hireling spirit. You're going to have a hireling culture within your worship team. You're going to have a celebrity culture within your worship team. And I think that's something that's important, that you make sure that you avoid with regards to worship teams and running worship departments. I think when it comes to brokenness, one of the things that have challenged me when it comes to worship is, do we worship when it's convenient or do we worship when it's comfortable? I'll never ever forget There was a season that I had to go through in my previous ministry where I was off the platform for, I think, a month. And again, this has got nothing to do with the ministry or the church. It's something that God had to take me through personally. And I remember being off of the platform for, I think, 2 months. And I would go to church every single Sunday because I would say to the Lord, Lord, I was never here for a stage. I was never here for a platform. I was here to worship, and you promoted me and you gave me the opportunity to worship on the church's platform. So regardless of whether I'm on the platform or off, my worship doesn't change. So I went every single week and I would worship every single Sunday. Was it painful at times? Sheesh, it was painful because there was a certain situation at hand and I knew what was truth. And the Lord just said to me, worship every week, go. I'll vindicate you. I remember the last night before returning back to platform ministry. I still remember the song. I think it was, I'm gonna sing in the middle of the storm. Louder and louder, you're gonna hear my praises roar. And I went on my knees and the Lord said to me, this is exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to see that whether you have a microphone in your hand or whether you're on your knees in the church, would you still worship me? And I realized at that moment that there are going to be seasons in your life that it's going to be costly. It's going to cost you. And that cost is going to be worth it, because in that cost or in that crushing, God is just producing more and more oil. And I think we forget that sometimes. We forget that when we go through these things, we might not understand right now why we're going through what we're going through. But when you have to lead worship or take the platform, there's an oil and a substance of heaven that's on you that is able to break chains and break yokes. And we forget that. We forget that in the crushing, just like an olive when it's pressed, oil comes out. We forget that that's actually what happens to us. We might not understand what God is doing. And let me just tell you, most of the times, you might never understand why God is allowing certain things to happen. Still to this day, I'm going through certain things why I don't know why God is allowing X, Y, and Z in my personal life. Nothing with a ministry, nothing with a specific person, with me as in Allan, because we go through things, right? And I had to learn, there's a part of a song, I think it's New Wine. When I trust you, I don't need to understand. And I realized, sheesh, that's going to be something that I'm going to live by. Trust does not mean I understand. And at the same time, that you must realize in worship, it's the same with cost. The cost that you're going to pour out before God. The cost of your worship. There's a cost. Well, let me say, there's a price to your oil. And that price is what you've gone through. That price is when you stand on the platform and you see someone being delivered, you see someone being set free, you see someone encountering God. Not that it's about you or your voice, but it's the presence of God within you and on you at that moment. And that oil is developed in times of crushing. You know, I want to ask you, are you willing to worship through suffering? If Job worshipped God even after losing everything, if Paul and Silas worshipped in the prison and prison doors broke open, then I want to encourage you today, no matter what the cost, no matter what you have to go through, worship. Worship Him in spirit and in truth. Worship Him when you feel like you don't want to worship Him. You know how many times I've worshipped in moments of my life where I felt like there's nothing going on. I feel nothing. I feel, and it's emotions, but I feel that nothing's happening in the atmosphere. I feel like I'm not anointed, and I know a lot of you go through that as well. But I realized there and then, it's got nothing to do with me as a worshiper. It's got everything to do with Him. It's not about my gifting. It's not about my voice. It's not about my talents. It's not about what I've just gone through. Because at the end of the day, your gifts and your talents, let me remind you, don't have the power to break chains. Only the presence of God does. So develop that in secret. Develop that in private. Develop that behind a closed door. And in that, in the private, God will lift you up and you'll do something with your life for everyone to see. I hope you enjoyed today. Please like, please subscribe, please engage with me. I really want to know what you thought of today's podcast. I'm going to definitely do a follow-up on worship, and I'll see you soon.